Hey guys, thanks for joining me for another Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia video, and today I am going to attempt a team building guide for DFFOO. Now, this comes from my Discord, and by the way, I'll quick plug my Discord. My Discord is linked in all of my video descriptions, so if you're interested in joining my Discord, not just for DFFOO, but for DOKKAN Battle as well, and you want to get help with team building or just anything in the game at all, we're a really nice, friendly group there. Feel free to hop in. I'm fairly active in there. Odds are, if you request me, I will try to actually help you personally if you tag me in there. But of course, give me time to do that, right? I get pretty busy at times. And so in my Discord, I have a video request channel where people can request videos they'd like to see me make. And I recently got a request for a DFFOO team building guide. Now, I got a couple of reasons for doing this or attempting this. One is it's very dead on both games right now. Basically, the day I'm recording this, we're waiting a few more days for Renoa to drop. It's kind of like that longer span between events. And DOKKAN is just not really doing nothing right now. I'm kind of waiting for Quest Mode to get updated, waiting for Vegito Blues EZA. So a couple of days here where I want to kind of do some videos. And I was hesitant to do this because I feel like a team building video in DFFOO is kind of difficult because like the general idea of team building is quite simple. Right? But then the thing is new players don't know like what role characters are. So I'm going to give you guys a couple of just general team building philosophies, and this is taking place during the Shinryu era, which is a little bit different maybe than a traditional build. So I'm going to talk about just some traditional team building philosophies and then talk about some things to think about now. And then what I'm going to do at the end is I'm literally going to go through every character in the game and I'm going to assign a role to each character. So then based on my ideas for team building, you can just, if you're a new player, you have a general idea as to like what role each character is. And some characters it gets a little muddy, right? They can have multiple roles, but some will be more clear than others. So the quick, simple answer for a generic guideline to start with team building, once again, this is going to change depending on the event, the force weapon you're using, all that stuff. It's not like an all for one. So I'm going to talk about a few philosophies here, right? The general philosophy I look at for a team build is, I've got a team up on the board right now, which is Luna, Freya, Tifa, and Core. So my general team building philosophy is you have one main DPS. So a DPS is defined as a character who is a top tier damage dealer in the game. Or for the type of team you're building, they're meant to be your main damage dealer, okay? So you need to have at least one, and once again, not for all cases, but for this standard team build, give me a good DPS. Then your second slot, you want a good support character, typically somebody that can heal. So in that slot, I've got Luna Freya, okay? Then the third slot is what I like to call the utility slot. The utility slot can be kind of whatever you want. So there's some characters that I would define as like a utility character that they kind of do a lot of interesting things, like they could paralyze, they could be a delay character, they could be a tank or something like that, right? So or a combination of those things, right? Or we would have what is a dedicated tank, right? So a tank is a character that could go in the third slot. You could have a counter character, which a lot of times counter characters and tanks kind of fall into that. You could supplement with like a secondary DPS, so maybe you want multiple DPS, or supplement with a secondary support unit, okay? Now, sometimes this third slot gets determined in a couple of ways. Let's say Luna Freya, for example, was my main support, but let's say she didn't heal. So sometimes there are very good support, like aura-based characters, that don't heal. So I think Bartz would be a good example. Bartz is a character that I would consider to be a very good support, but his healing, he's not really meant to be a healer, right? So then your third utility spot might be just a character that can heal. That could also be a support, but maybe they're like a sub-DPS or something like that. But the general idea, a main DPS, a main support, and then that third slot is really kind of open-ended. So Luna Freya is my main support, Tifa is my main DPS, and Core would be like my utility spot. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with Core, Core does a lot of off-turn damage. And so something I will say coming from just the Shinryu Force Time era perspective of things, off-turn is quite powerful. So in a lot of team builds, you might want an off-turn damage dealer that basically they will deal damage during the main DPS's burst/force time just to help add on some more chip damage with that, right? So this is what I would say is kind of a standard build. Once again, DPS, support, and then that third slot's pretty open with utility, tank, whatever you want. Now, that doesn't have to be your main formula, right? Another formula could be this. Sometimes you build the team geared toward a specific fight, or you build it geared towards a force time. So the way the game works these days is that the bosses have a lot of HP, and you really deal most of your damage during a force time. So in this example, we would build a team around Core's force effect. So Core's force time, what you want to do during that force time is build up the HP damage percentage through fulfilling his conditions. Well, one of his conditions is just dealing off-turn damage. So this is what I would call an off-turn team comp, where the goal is you would use this in a fight where the enemies are very aggressive, and you just let your team sit and counter and build up the gauge. So this team goes against that traditional formula I just talked about, where this is literally basically 3 counter tank characters is what it is, or / off turn, right? So you just build the whole team to really work towards that force effect. You don't worry about having a support or dedicated DPS or anything like that. I would say all of these 3 characters would classify as tanks / utility characters. So you don't have to necessarily have a DPS, a healer, a support, whatever. As you learn the game and you learn the characters, you'll decide what works out. So the way this team works is Gao double counters anytime the team is attacked. Gladio is a cover tank, so Gladio will cover any character, soak up any damage, and counterattack. Because of the way that Gao's mechanic works, Gao counters if the team is attacked. It doesn't have to be himself. Gladio has to be attacked, but he's going to cover any attack that comes through. So basically, every time somebody attacks, Gladio counters once, Gao counters twice, and then the way Core works is he's going to get 2 to 3 follow-ups every time an enemy or an ally acts, which all is off-turn damage. So this team would be centralized around Core's force time, okay? So a couple of philosophies. But the main thing is just kind of knowing what type of fight you're going into and how you want to build the team. So let's go in and let's try to build a team together here just as an example. So a great way to start a team is in Shinryu era, typically for the path of least resistance, you want a force time, right? So what you typically will do is pick a specific force character. So in this example, we'll use Fujin, because Fujin, I feel is a very, underutilized character in the game, and I think Fujin's quite fun. I like Fujin. You can see I've got the blue Jin going on here. I maxed out my Fujin. So let's say I want to develop a team centralized around Fujin. Well, what you need to do is you need to start by looking at what their force time is. And if you don't know how the force time works, I do character guides on every character as their force weapons come out. So look up Fujin character guide on my channel. I will talk about her force time and how it works. But just if you want to look it up on your own, we can just go ahead and go into Fujin's passives here and we can find the force weapon. In the force weapon description at the very bottom, it's telling you what the HP damage bonus is. And that's really what you want to work on. So Fujin gets 20% if the party member does a wind attack, and 40% if you inflict knockback. So if you're doing a wind knockback attack, you are getting 60%. That's what you want to do in this team, right? Now, obviously going into this, you're going to want to kind of study the characters, learn them a little bit. Once again, my character guides will be a great help for that. But Fujin, she does enchant the party to wind. So you've got your wind covered. The only thing you have to keep in mind is characters that inherently already are doing an element on their attack, you can't enchant wind on top of it. The attack that the character is doing has to be a non-elemental attack. So one thing we're going to keep in mind is we're only going to use characters that are wind or non-elemental, and then we want to inflict knockback. So you want to make sure that your team on every attack, not just Fujin's turn, is going to inflict knockback. And even Fujin can't inflict knockback with every attack. She has several attacks that can do it. But not every attack can, right? So what you can do is this. You go into your filters. So you go to sort your characters by filters, and you want to search for what is going to give me that force time. So one, we're not going to worry about wind, because we're going to enchant ourselves for that. So what we want to look at is we want to look at knockback, okay? And knockback here is a filter that we can sort by. So we're going to turn knockback on. So now what it's going to do is all the characters in this list are characters that can inflict knockback. Now, in terms of who's the best one to use, that's going to come with you learning the characters and the kits and how often they can knock back. What I'll tell you right now is Selfie is the best knockback character in the game. So if I slot Selfie onto my team, what she's going to do is her LD effect is going to make it so that every character knockbacks no matter what, as long as enemies have the debuff. So if I'm going to slot Selfie into this team, I can put whatever I want in slot 2. Well, looking at Selfie and Fujin, neither one of them is a DPS, so now I might slot Tifa in there, or like a really strong DPS character. There we go. I have made a team comp centralized around Fujin. Selfie and Tifa are both non-elemental characters, so they're going to get wind damage. Selfie's going to make sure everybody is launching constantly. So that's a great way to build a team, right? Now, you might not have Selfie, so let's look at what some other options are. For those of you that don't know, probably the next best, like, consistent knockback characters would be a character like Sid Reigns or a character like Leo. Now, you wouldn't have to have both of them on the team. The way these characters work is they are going to enable the team, the rest of the team, to launch fairly consistently. So you wouldn't have to have both of them, you could have one of them. So kind of like the Selfie situation, I could grab Reigns, and then I could just pick any other character. And for the other character, I could just pick, I could take the filter off and I could choose from anybody, right? So filter traits, let's turn knockback off and confirm. And now I could just choose anybody. So once again, I could pick a character that I think would be a fun DPS, and I could maybe just slot that character in. So I could go ahead and say, you know, I don't know, just any character that's non-elemental that we could say is a good DPS, like Cloud, right? Let's go grab Cloud. Where's Cloud? Right here. So let's throw Cloud in there, right? And Cloud is also going to delay and do all kinds of other stuff, right? Now, Cloud also will come up under the knockback filter. He also has launching, and he does on his 35. So Cloud can do it fairly consistently. The one thing you have to keep in mind is when your filter, if you're like a newer player and you don't like understand the kits, just because a character does knockback doesn't mean they do it consistently. Some characters on that list like only do it with their EX, which you're not going to have every attack, right? So it's a matter of learning the characters, but that's kind of the gist of how you build a team, right? And I would say in this era, center it around a force character and then build the team that you're going to maximize that force time. And you can sometimes smash a couple together and get multiple force times going with multiple characters, right? So just to rephrase what I was talking about here, okay? The general idea, just not considering force at all, I like a DPS, a support, and then a utility. Another way is designing it around a force time or a specific team comp, which in terms of like a defense comp like this or a counter comp, something like that can work, right? And then once again, designing around that force time. So that's going to be my general overview into team building, okay? Now what this next part of the video is going to be, so if you're not interested in this part, feel free to stop now. But if you're a newer player and you don't even know what these characters are, I am going to very quickly, and we'll see, I hope this doesn't go too long. I have 159 characters, and I currently have every character in the game. I'm recording this in October of 2022, just before Renoa's Force Time comes out. But I'm just going to quickly go through every character, and I'm going to just give them kind of a class. I'm going to say if they're DPS, a utility, a support, if they heal or not. I'm just going to do a quick overview, so that way if you're trying to team build on your own, you could maybe just quickly like say, okay, Joe says this character's a DPS, so I'm going to try them as my DPS, right? Or Joe says this character's a good tank, let me try them as a tank, right? So we're going to try to do this very, very quickly. Bart's, I would say, would be like your main support. As I mentioned earlier, you might need to bring another healer with Bart's, but he's a support character. Ferris, I would say, is a utility off-turn character. So Ferris does off-turn, but I would consider her utility. She does a lot of debuffing. Very, very, very good. So Ferris would fill your slot 3 role, okay? Leo, I would say, is kind of utility as well. A lot of delay. His damage is okay, but I would consider Leo like a slot 3 character. Not really enough damage to be your main DPS. Not a support character, though, either. So I would consider Leo kind of a utility character. Tifa, main DPS. Currently, as of this recording, best DPS in the game. Renoa will be right up there with her. So yes, DPS there. Zell, I would say, is a DPS all through and through. And he can take a lot of turns. He's kind of like a version of... kind of like Terra in a lot of ways, can take a lot of turns. Good DPS. So yeah, I would say Zell's just flat out DPS. Selfie, top tier support. Enables launching, heals, decent auras. Selfie is one of the best supports in the game at the time of recording. Garnet, support. Very, very good support character. One of the best in the game still. Lude, I would say support as well. Lude heals, he enables EXs. Very, very good solid support character. That's a good force time as well. Agrius, I would say utility / support. Agrius, I think, heals enough that Agrius could be your main support, but she's also very utility. She shuts down the enemies, stops them from attacking. Very good shutdown character. 8 would be I would call 8 a dodge tank. So 8's role is dodges and counters. So dodge counter tank is what 8 would be. That would be like a slot 3 type role, or if you're running one of those counter builds, 8 could work there. Jack would be DPS, but he's just not very good, so I really wouldn't run. I mean, if you're running Jack, you're probably going to want another DPS with him. He's okay, but he's classified as a DPS. Oh, the other thing I should tell you guys, just as a hint, characters have spheres. The spheres indicate what type of character they are as well. So, A spheres are used typically for DPS characters. Let me back to, so you see how like 8 also has it, but this doesn't tell you that 8 is a counter tank as well. So 8's also, so it doesn't tell you everything, right? But like if you see C, that means support. E is more like debuffing. So if you see a character with like triple E, then they're like mainly a debuffer, right? If you see a character with double or triple C's, they're mainly a support. When you see a mix like what Agrius has, they're going to be utility. They do a little bit of all those things, right? So Immortalion is definitely utility. Their big thing is they debuff and they delete turns, so they would be a slot 3 character. Warrior of Light is a 100% tank. Could double as a support. He has a little bit of healing on that EX, but he keeps your party very safe with shield. So I would think of Warrior of Light as a slot 3 unit. Garland would be a DPS. And you see the AAA sphere there. DPS delay character. Furion would be a support. I would say a support DPS. I mean, he's support and he does off turn. So Furion is very solid, actually. He gets better as he gets like his reworks and stuff. But yeah, C90 Furion, I like him. He could be your main DPS if you wanted to. Maria is very much utility and semi-support because Maria does heal. Maria debuffs a little bit. So she would be kind of like a slot 3 character, I would say. Leon is another. You're going to see a lot of these characters are going to be kind of like slot 3 characters because they just kind of do a little bit of everything. Yeah, Leon is kind of utility. He's very specialized in that you have to be able to basically enchant the enemies for dark damage, and then he makes it so your team absorbs dark damage, which is very cool. Guy would be kind of like a supportish type character, I would say. Support utility character. Layla is awesome. I freaking love Layla. Layla I would classify in, once again, I would say Layla could be a support / tank. Because Layla's big thing is she dodges and then pulls your party up and heals every time she dodges. So I kind of think of Layla as like a dodge tank, but is also healing, so could be your primary healer. Very, very cool. Emperor is a DPS / debuffing unit, so he's very much like a utility DPS. Sets a lot of traps, does a lot of debuffs, but he could be your primary DPS for sure. Onion Knight is kind of odd, but primarily a DPS. Does a lot of elements and things like that, but I would say Onion Knight's kind of a DPS / utility. Dash, yeah. Dash would be another one of these slot 3 characters. Utility, kind of defensive. You could almost call Dash a tank a little bit just because he kind of mitigates damage to the party. He's interesting, but he's going to be probably, if you're doing that first, and I'm kind of talking about this in terms of main DPS support and then your slot 3. So when I say slot 3, they're probably not your first or second choice on the team, but they're kind of that third slot, right? Clouded Darkness would be a main DPS for sure. Delay, a lot of off turn, very, very good character. Zande's just kind of, I don't know. He's got 3 A slots, so I'm going to say he's DPS. But you can see I haven't built my Zande, but sure. Zande's a DPS. If you love him and you build him up, he could be your main DPS, right? Dark Cecil. I would consider Dark Cecil to be primarily a DPS launch character. Paladin Cecil's a support for sure. 100% support. Edge would be a utility, I would say dodge tank. Well, the thing with Edge is he turns your whole party into dodge tanks, which is awesome. Edge is one of the more valuable characters in the game. Very, very good. So, just as an example, right, I'm calling Edge like a slot 3 dodge tank character. So what you do is it would be Edge, main DPS, and then still bring a support. That's your team, right? Okay. Yang. So Yang is a damage dealer, but to me, I don't like Yang as the primary damage dealer. So Yang's big role is off turn. So to me, he would be in that slot that Core is in. So Yang would be there for off turn, still bring main DPS, still bring support for a standard build, right? Kane is DPS, but he's also off turn. So Kane can definitely carry as your main DPS. He hits hard. He also launches, but you can bring, so Kane would be an example of where you might bring a double DPS. So it might be Kane for off turn / DPS, but then Tifa is main DPS, and then maybe like a Luna Freya or something would work just fine. Kane, very, very good. Palom is a DPS, but not very strong as a DPS. Just some characters, you know, they can't just make every character busted, right? So some characters have to be just okay. That's where Palom is. He's a DPS, but he's just okay. Rydia, I would say DPS slash support a little bit. The water enchant is powerful. She can allow the party to dodge, so there's some utility there. But I could see Rydia as a DPS, but I would see her more in that slot 3, not my main DPS. Rosa's a support through and through, so mainly a support character for Rosa. Porom, excellent support. Love Porom. Porom definitely could be your solid mainstay support. Edward support, who he's actually getting upgraded with Renoa, so I am going to be doing a C90 on Edward, but he's definitely like full-on support. Golbez is DPS, but not very good. He's just, yeah, but he's DPS. I'll just say Golbez DPS. I got to get through these characters, right? So I'm going to go quick on some of these. Theodore, I would say support utility, but mainly a support. Ursula, I would call Ursula DPS. Ursula, I would say DPS slash support. So Ursula, I think you could put as your main DPS, and I think Ursula is actually okay, and she's got a good force time that she can carry. But she does support enough that you could use Ursula as your main support, and then still have a DPS, or you could have Ursula as like a secondary DPS slash support. So I think Ursula could really fill any of those roles very well. Galoof is definitely a tank. So a very, very good tank character. Would probably be a slot 3 tank, or would be on a tank comp if you want a full tank comp. Cryle, yeah, I would say Cryle's mainly a support. She does okay damage, but you see she's got like C's and D's for hers. And the D ones, I believe, are the tanking. No, B's tanking sphere. What are the D ones again? I'm trying to remember. Oh, those are like, yeah, I think those are just more buff support type spheres. So C and D's are like your buffing support spheres. So yeah, I would say Cryle's mainly like a support, but Cryle doesn't really heal, I don't think. So you might need to bring a healer with Cryle. I would think of Cryle as more of like a slot 3 or a sub support character. Lena's definitely a good full support character. Very, very good support character. Gilgamesh is a DPS, just not the craziest one. X-Death would be another DPS. He's mainly a DPS slash debuff gravity character. So he does do gravity, which is interesting, but you definitely, X-Death could be your main DPS. Terra's definitely main DPS for sure. Locke. So Locke is like really utility based, but he is a DPS. Like he does good damage. He's definitely fallen off, but once again, no matter when you're watching these characters, the roles of the characters for the most part don't change. It's just a matter of how recent their upgrade is whether they're going to be meta relevant, right? So Locke has fallen off. Like he's not going to be a top tier DPS at the moment I'm recording this, but when he got his C90, he was. But he has very good utility in that he can heal. He basically can allow your party to ignore defense, which is very powerful, right? And he also makes it so you can't be broken, which is, yeah. Locke is awesome. So he could be your main DPS, or you could have him as a slot 3 utility. Shadow is DPS slash a little bit utility. But Shadow, he can put in work. He does dodge counter stuff. He does follow-ups. His like per turn damage isn't crazy, but if you add it all up with all of the off turn and dodge shenanigans, he can add up a lot of damage. Setzer's definitely like a utility. He enables the party to hit rainbow numbers, so he's a very good utility character, can delay. Sabin is DPS, for sure. And Sabin, like, if you have his force, he's the one that you want to carry the force. Cyan is also DPS, ignores defense. But I would say Sabin and Cyan are kind of in that role where they're DPS, but they're not going to be hitting like Tifa, right? So just because I'm saying they're a DPS doesn't mean they're top tier DPS. I'm just saying that's what their role is, right? Edgar's definitely utility. He allows all different types of weakness damage. Celis would be support slash utility, for sure. She's very, very cool. She basically absorbs magic, which is really, really awesome. And then has like off turn healing attacks. So yeah, I would say she's a support slash utility. She does decent damage also, but yeah, she'd be kind of like a slot 3 character. Realm actually can serve multiple roles. It just depends. If you put the Sylph summon, because Realm will actually attack based on the summon equipped, Realm could be your dedicated healer if you put the Sylph summon on. Otherwise, she could be basically kind of a utility DPS character. Gao is definitely an off-turn tank type character, so he's a counter tank. I wouldn't say, I guess tank is the wrong word for Gao. He's a counter character because he doesn't actually tank, but you typically run him on comps with, like, say, Gladio, who's going to help him tank. But Gao is a counter character, so definitely like utility. Strago's a damage dealer. He's just, at the time I'm recording this, probably not your first choice, but he's a damage dealer. Mog is definitely like a utility support type character. Kefka's actually a debuff utility character, so you can see triple E slot, like he's all about the debuffing, right? So I would say Kefka's probably more of a slot 3, but as he gets more upgrades, he could be a main DPS in the future. Cloud would be a DPS character for sure. Yuffie is definitely like a debuff support type character. Vincent's kind of interesting. I would say Vincent is a debuff DPS. Vincent can definitely put in work damage-wise, so I would say DPS slash debuffer. 100% Aerith is a support character who Aerith is getting an FR soon. I'm probably going to get her FR and max it out. Sid, I would say, is mainly a DPS. Kate Sith is definitely support, 100% support. Barrett is kind of utility support. He enables crit damage, not the strongest DPS, so he's like a slot 3. Sephiroth is main DPS. Reno is definitely utility support, slot 3 type character. Root is definitely support character, major healer. Kadaj is a debuff slash DPS. I would say debuff slash DPS. Zack is a tank, 100% tank DPS. Cissnei is off turn, so utility off turn with Cissnei. Shulk is a DPS. I would say yes. Squall's DPS, AoE primarily. Laguna is a DPS debuffer and does off turn as well. Irvine is kind of more of like a utility type character, I would say. Quistis is a utility. She's mainly a debuff slash delay character, so she's going to be a slot 3 character for you. Renoa, the girl of the hour who's coming up very soon, hardcore main DPS character. Cypher, I would say, is a DPS delay character. Raijin, I would say more of a utility. He protects your party with a very powerful debuff, very slow. So I would say kind of just that third slot utility character with Raijin. Fujin, same thing, a third slot kind of utility character. Ultimisia is a DPS. Zidane is definitely like utility, but I would say utility DPS. But Zidane is one of the characters that does like so many different things. He can launch, he can delete turns, he can actually like provide a ton of healing and battery. Very interesting jack of all trades character that could really fit any role you want with Zidane. I could use Zidane as my main DPS. He could be my main healer. He could be my main utility. So Zidane you can really put anywhere you want. He's a cool character. Vivi's a DPS for sure. Steiner is kind of utility. He does some buffing, debuffing with a little bit of damage. Aiko is 100% support with healing and revive. Freya is definitely support slash off turn. So along with Kayn, Freya would be one of your main off turns. So if you're looking for that third off turn slot that I had Core in, Freya is a very good one for that, as is Kayn. Beatrix, I would say actually support. I like Beatrix a lot for support. Does healing, does off turn, protects the party. So yeah, I would say Beatrix is a fairly decent support utility character. Kuja's a DPS for sure. Tidus, hardcore DPS. Yuna, main support. Waka, utility, buffer, debuffer. Oron is a tank. Lulu, DPS slash support. Not a great DPS, I'm just going to say that right now, but that's what I'll classify her as. Kamari, I would say, could be a main support slash utility. Does healing, enables blind, like 100% blind on enemies, so he's a cool character. Braska, main support. Seymour, I would say, damage dealer slash debuffer. Jekt is a main damage dealer. Pain is interesting. So Pain is one of these unique characters where she does different things based on where you put her. So you would either want to use her as like a primary debuffer. So she's for sure a slot 3 character. We'll just say that right now. But you either use her as a debuffer or a buff support character. So she can serve multiple roles that way. Very, very cool character is Pain. Shantado, I'm going to have to say DPS. And Shantado is getting an upgrade here with Renoa. So I will do a character guide on Shantado. Shantado, I would say, is a DPS slash debuff character, but just hasn't ever been super powerful when she comes around. Prish is a main DPS. I love Prish. Gosh, I almost want to do a new video with Prish just to see how she can do in Shinryu these days. Lion is kind of a DPS utility character, I would say. DPS slash utility. Little Slot, I would say, is a main support. Aphmau is like a support utility. Aphmau basically enables other characters to take more turns, so you kind of use her in specific team comps. Arciella is very good. I would say support / utility, but Arciella can be your main support because she can heal. She shuts down the enemies. Very good character. Arciella is probably one of my MVPs of this game's history, to be honest. Aroha, main support with healing. Cam is definitely a DPS and enables one of the more busted force times in the game. It's starting to fall off now where like other force times are just easier to use, but his force time was basically broken and we took advantage of it, and Squex didn't want to fix it. So he definitely main DPS, but does have very good utility in his like paralyze effect, where you can basically keep the enemies constantly paralyzed like that. Eldnurse is God, how do you classify Eldnurse? I'm gonna call Eldnurse a tank. Some people might disagree with this, but basically Eldnurse, when properly set up, just stops the enemies from attacking, and you could put like Eldnurse can just lock them down and they can't attack. So I'm gonna kind of call Eldnurse a utility tank, to be honest. Not a traditional tank, but stops the enemies from literally attacking. So if that's not a tank, I don't know what is. Vaughn for sure is 100% DPS with a little debuffing, but DPS main. Penelo for sure support main. Very, very good. Balthier is for sure like a utility debuff character. Ashe, I would say a utility slot 3 character. Does some paralyzing, does some cool things there. Fran, once again, mainly a debuffer, so this would be like a slot 3 character. Bosch is a tank. Vayne is a DPS. Gabranth is a support, debuffing. Like debuffer, yeah. Gabranth debuffer. With a little bit of tanking. I'll say a little bit of tanking in there. Lightning DPS. Saz support. Hope support. Vanille support debuffing, mainly debuffer. Yeah, debuffer for and like she dispels, like a dispeller debuffer. Yes. Snow, I would say DPS tank. I would say he leans a little bit more DPS than tank, but I would still call him a tank for sure. Heavy hitter though. Fang, kind of a DPS / debuffer. Reigns is, I'm just going to call Reigns a launcher. That's his role as launching, but he would be a DPS, right? But launching is, like, I think of Reigns as just like a walking launch stick. He just makes everything launch. Everything just flies up in the air when Reigns shows up. Sarah, debuff utility. It's like support. Sarah's support, for sure. Good auras. I don't think Sarah heals, though, off the top of my head, but very good support character. Noel is a damage dealer, so DPS. Caius, DPS / debuffer. Ishtola, main support. Ida, DPS, I suppose, with Sephiroth busted combo. Lisa's a DPS, just not the craziest one. / buffer. She does a little bit of buffing. Thancred is the class of trash, so he's just trash. I can't give Thancred is a debuffer, but he's probably one of the more shafted characters in this game's history. We'll put it that way, but sure, he poisons. That's what he does. He debuffs. Papa Limo, damage dealer, DPS. Alisaie, I would say Alisaie is a DPS. I like Alisaie as a DPS character. Alphanaut, I would say, is more support, definitely, with some healing. Noctis, main DPS. Prompto, utility. Ignis, main support. Gladio, main tank. Lunafreya, best support character in the game at the time of recording. Her and Selphie and Garnet probably like my top 3 right now for supports. Core, off turn, and I would say DPS just because all the damage adds up, but typically you're not running Core as your main DPS, with exception to that. I would say in that full defense comp I showed, Core kind of is the main DPS because on his own turn, he's dishing out the most damage. But he's mainly like an off-turn kind of support utility character. But one of the best characters in the game, period, right now is Core. In that slot 3, like on most team builds, if I could choose any slot 3, it's going to be Core. So right now, my best team in the game, because if I could choose any slot 3, it's probably Core. If I can choose any support, it's Lunafreya. If I can choose any DPS, it's Tifa. So right now, at the time of recording, I think that's the best team in the game, is Tifa, Lunafreya, Core. Obviously, this game constantly fluctuates and changes, which is why I never do tier lists, because literally 3 days after I make the tier list, it's changed. Because every time a new character comes out, they're going to upend the tier list, right? So I could tell you today, Tifa's best DPS, but in 3 days when Renoa comes out, you could argue Renoa's best DPS, right? So that's why tier lists aren't really a huge thing in DFFOO. It just changes so much. Arden, I would say, is a DPS for sure. Yeah, would say DPS. I'll call him a tank too. I'll call him a DPS tank because he literally can't die. If you have his, buff up, he literally can't die. So what's more tanky than a character that just soaks up damage and can't die, right? So I would say Arden is a tank. Yeah, Irenae is a DPS for sure. Ramza full support. Ace DPS with traps. Rem full support. King, I guess I have to say DPS. I mean, that's technically what he is. Cater, I'm going to say support, but she's also like a dodge tank. So dodge tank with some support. I love Cater, by the way, and she has off turn. Cater's pretty darn cool. I love Cater. Seven is a DPS, just not a great one. Deuce is a support. She's getting upgraded soon, so look for a guide on her. Sync is a DPS, just a very slow one. Machina, main DPS. Trey is a DPS / trap character. So he's a trap-based DPS. Maybe more of a slot 3 character than a main slot character. 9, I would say, is a tank, or enables your party to tank, like Warrior of Light does. Queen, I would say, is a heal support utility. Yeah, I mean, Queen could be your main healer, so I'll call Queen like a utility support. They have her more classified as a DPS. I don't know if I agree with that, but Seiss is a DPS and has a very good off-turn debuff. So even though she's not showing E-Spheres, very important debuff with DPS. Kurasame, definitely like a support utility character for sure, because he enables your party to do more damage. Kieran is a support. Charlotta support. Yuri DPS / buffing character, like buffing and utility, but mainly a DPS I would say is Yuri. Lael is a launch support, so I would say launch support character. Kais is a launch support character, so those were back to back. Jegren kind of in that trash tier for me, but DPS, sure. Lana and Rain is AoE specific DPS. They have to be AoE. Single target, they are trash, but AoE DPS, yes. And a Crow, DPS / utility in that she can delete turns, which I love. But yeah, she's a DPS. Bart's full support. Ferris is like debuff, like as a utility debuffer, but also as off turn. Love the new iteration of Ferris. Very, very good slot 3 character. Leo, I already talked about, kind of like a slot 3 kind of support character. Wait, am I cycling through? Am I done? Oh, I'm done. We went all the way through. Nice! Alright, so I went through all the characters. Now, you might disagree with some of my classifications, which is fine. But if you guys want help with team building, honestly, the best thing to do, just hop into my Discord. We have a DFFOO chat, and you can just hop in, and there's a lot of great people on there that will help you. There's actually other content creators in my Discord that'll help you. So not just me, you'll get access to multiple content creators. So anyways, guys, I hope this team building guide helps. Hope I didn't rant on too long. Thanks for watching. We'll catch y'all on the next one.